kind of told my therapist he's weak in bed, but he somehow found it out. Then this happened. My decision of going to a therapist for my mental sanity led to the end of my marriage. It was the worst decision of my life. I was so anxious all the time as my facade of a loving and caring wife was slowly fading away, even though I put my best acting forward. I was scared that my husband would see through me and our relationship would end. After seeking therapy, I realized that I needed to prioritize my own well-being and mental health, even if it meant facing difficult truths about my marriage. Ultimately, the decision to seek help was a necessary step towards finding peace and clarity in my life. To begin with, my name is Gloria, female 37, married to Bob, male 51, for 2 years now. I met my husband after deliberate planning as I wanted to get married to him because he was rich. I knew that he was down due to his divorce, so I wanted to grab that opportunity so that I could win some brownie points and make an impression on him. It worked like a charm, and he wanted to meet me again to get to know me better. That is how it started, and I made sure that I made him believe that I was the right one for him. Before he could realize, we were married, and I felt so happy to have accomplished my plan of getting married to a rich man. However, as time went on, I began to realize that money couldn't buy happiness, and our relationship lacked true connection. Despite the initial excitement of achieving my goal, I found myself feeling unfulfilled in the long run. It was his second marriage. He had a daughter from his previous marriage who was 3 years younger than me. She and I did not get along as expected. Obviously, she would not like her mother being replaced by someone who was as old as her. It was understandable, and I did not even try to get to know her, as I had nothing to do with her. My main focus was making sure that my husband was happy and satisfied with me. I made an effort to be cordial and polite when we were around each other, but I didn't push for a closer relationship. I believed that as long as my husband and I were happy together, everything else would fall into place eventually. I hoped that with time she would come to accept me and we could build a relationship. However, for the time being, I respected her feelings and focused on building a strong bond with my husband. I married my husband solely for his money. I am a gold digger, and I have no shame in admitting to it. Love is not always important. You don't live a happy life just because you are in love. There are bills and necessities that can't be fulfilled just by love. It's important to be honest about your priorities and make choices that align with your values. Financial stability and security are important factors in a successful marriage, and I made a calculated decision to prioritize that over love. Ultimately, my husband's wealth has provided me with the comfort and lifestyle I desire. I worked hard to lobby around Bob to get him to acknowledge me so that he gets married to me. However, I have come to realize that true happiness comes from a balance of love and financial stability. It is important to prioritize both in order to have a successful and fulfilling marriage. In the end, I am grateful for the life that my husband's wealth has afforded us, but I also value the love and connection we share. My husband is 14 years older than me, and I am practically his daughter's age. It did not cause much of a problem initially, as I tried my best to be a loving and faithful wife. But as time went by, I knew that this relationship is not going to last that long if I did not put in much effort. After a while, it got tiring, and I started hating spending time with Bob. It was like taking care of an old man. We could not travel much due to his health, and the only thing we did was spend some days on his yacht. I was tired of doing the same thing over and over. I realized that I needed to prioritize my own happiness and well-being, so I made the decision to talk to Bob about how I was not happy with how this relationship is going. It was a necessary step for me to find fulfillment and joy in my life again. On the yacht over the weekend, I sat Bob down and told him that I was not very content with how our relationship is not adding value to my life. I am feeling unsatisfied both emotionally and physically. He smiled and told me that I was just overthinking. He said that he could sponsor a trip for me and my friends if I wanted to go out to spend some quality time with them. I realized that there was no way that Bob would acknowledge that the problem is him not being able to do the things that I am interested in. This response made me realize that Bob was not willing to address the underlying issues in our relationship. It became clear that his solution of sponsoring a trip was just a temporary distraction from the real problem. I knew then that it was time to reevaluate the relationship and consider if our values and interests aligned. I came back home being even more dejected than I was before. I did not know how to make this marriage work while being happy at the same time. I wanted Bob to at least accept that he did not have the same energy that I did in bed due to the difference in our age. How could he just blame me and my hormones for it? I thought about it for a couple of days and made up my mind to take up Bob's offer of going on a trip with my friends. Maybe that would help me clear my mind and give me some direction on how to go about this relationship. I told Bob that maybe he was right and I was just thinking about sitting at home. I said maybe taking a break would help me get some perspective in life. I needed some time away to reflect on what I truly wanted and needed in my marriage. Perhaps this trip would give me the clarity I was seeking. He said that he knew that I was missing him and feeling overwhelmed, and this would help me bring back my brighter self home. I packed my bags and eagerly awaited the adventure that awaited me, hoping it would provide some clarity on my next steps. As the plane took off, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for what was to come. I wanted to forget everything that was troubling me and have a blast. All my girlfriends were married to rich men and always looked so happy. I did not know if it was a facade or they were actually happy in their marriages. I was determined to find out for myself and perhaps gain some insight into what true happiness in a relationship looked like. Maybe this trip would give me the perspective I needed to make some important decisions in my own life. I wondered if I would ever find that kind of happiness or if I was destined for something different. The thought lingered in my mind as the plane soared through the clouds, carrying me towards an unknown destination. On the trip, I saw my friends flirting with strangers and taking it a little too far. I asked my friends if it was okay with their husbands that they were having this sexual tension with other men. They laughed and told me that these trips are for a purpose to help them let loose and have fun. This was their secret of being happily married and staying sane. They assured me that they were committed to their spouses and that harmless flirting was just a way to have fun and feel desired. It was a revelation for me to see how they maintained a strong bond with their partners while still enjoying themselves on these trips. I realized that everyone has their own way of maintaining a healthy relationship, and for my friends, it involved a bit of harmless flirting while on vacation. It was eye-opening to see how different couples navigate their marriages and find what works best for them. They asked me to try flirting once and see how liberating it is. I hesitated a bit, but then reminded myself that I was here to have fun, so why not try it? I let my friends choose a guy they wanted me to flirt with. I walked towards the chosen guy and asked him if he wanted to buy me a drink. I decided to be straightforward as I was not sure if I should be doing it. He seemed taken aback at first, but then he smiled and agreed to buy me a drink. The experience was definitely out of my comfort zone, but it was interesting to see how being more assertive could be empowering. We ended up having a great conversation, and I realized that flirting can be fun. He gave me a peck on my cheek as I was leaving, which made me blush. I ran into him accidentally at dinner, and my friends pushed me to go and have dinner with him. It felt so good to spend time with someone sharing the same energy as me. The conversation steered off to a sensual one, asking each other about their previous or current partners and what we liked doing in bed. I should have felt guilty, but I was enjoying the whole vibe that was being created. He asked me if we should take the conversation somewhere private, and without any hesitation, I decided to follow him to his room. We spent the whole night enjoying each other's company. I felt sexually satisfied after so long, and did not know how much I was missing sex in my life. The next morning, I woke up feeling a mix of excitement and guilt. As I left his room, I couldn't shake the feeling that what had happened was wrong, but at the same time, I couldn't deny how much I had enjoyed it. I came back from the trip and knew that sex is what was missing in my married life, and I should be able to get it to keep me happy. I now had the clarity that I should go out often and find people to have sex with, as there was no way Bob was capable of having sex every day. I started randomly picking out guys or men who wanted to have one-night stands and forget about it. This was the easiest way to feel fulfilled and keep my marriage intact. I hardly felt guilty for cheating on Bob, as I knew that there was no way he would be able to meet my sexual needs. I justified my actions by convincing myself that I was simply fulfilling my own needs. It became a routine for me to seek out casual encounters to satisfy my desires while maintaining the facade of a happy marriage with Bob. One Thursday, Bob told me that he saw me at a hotel while he was having lunch with his clients. He assumed that I was there with my girlfriends as well, because that was the only lie I could tell him about being outside the house. I felt so scared and relieved at the same time that Bob did not see who I was. I knew that I had to be more careful going forward so as not to be caught by Bob red-handed. I made a mental note to be more cautious about where I went and who I interacted with in the future. It was a wake-up call for me to be more mindful of my actions and the lies I told to cover them up. I had been having dreams about being caught by Bob and always on the edge while I was out with one of my boys who I had hired to satisfy me. I could not live freely without thinking about being caught at any moment. I spoke to Bob saying that I was feeling too anxious lately and don't know the reason for it. Obviously, there was no way I was going to tell him that cheating on him was making me anxious. He suggested that maybe I should hire a shrink to talk about what has been bothering me so that he could help me calm down. I did not think that to be a bad idea. Maybe if I could talk to someone about everything that I have been up to, I might feel at ease. I scheduled an appointment with a therapist and began opening up about my feelings of guilt and anxiety. It was a relief to finally have someone to confide in about my secret actions. Initially, I was very hesitant about how to let my therapist know about what I was actually doing. My therapist was almost as old as my husband, so I kind of spoke to him about the missing sex in my marriage, hoping that he would relate. I assumed that he might be going through something similar, so it would be easier for him to understand my problem. He maintained a professional demeanor and provided helpful advice without sharing personal details. This allowed me to feel comfortable discussing intimate issues with him. I found it reassuring that he was able to maintain boundaries while still being empathetic and understanding. This helped me open up more and make progress in therapy. After a few sessions, I completely opened up to my therapist about the reason for my anxiety. I told him that I was always on the edge, thinking that my husband might come to know about the things I do behind his back. I explained that I constantly feel guilty and worried about the consequences of my actions, leading to my overwhelming anxiety. My therapist helped me explore these feelings and work towards finding healthier coping mechanisms. He asked me to tell me in detail what I do to be this anxious and seek help. Through therapy, I learned to address the root causes of my anxiety and develop strategies to manage it effectively. With my therapist's guidance, I began to prioritize self-care and communication in my relationship to alleviate the feelings of guilt and worry that were contributing to my anxiety. He encouraged me to practice mindfulness and self-compassion, reminding me that it's important to prioritize my own mental health. Additionally, he suggested that I consider couples therapy to address the underlying issues in my relationship with my husband. I told him exactly what I do, assuming that he could suggest better ways to do this without feeling overwhelmed. I told him that I go to clubs and pick out young men and pay them handsome money to sleep with me. My therapist looked quite fascinated by my disclosure. He did not expect me to tell him this. After a moment of silence, he commended me for my honesty and courage in sharing such personal information. He assured me that our sessions would be a safe space to explore my motivations and behaviors without judgment. He listened attentively and asked me more about my motivations and feelings surrounding this behavior. I appreciated his non-judgmental approach and felt relieved to finally share this secret with someone. Bob told me that he was inviting one of his friends and his wife for dinner. He asked me to have everything ready and for me to dress up to spend the night with them. I was shocked to see that my therapist was the friend that Bob had been talking about. I was shell-shocked and did not know how I should handle this situation. I had never expected my therapist to be a guest at my dinner party, and I was unsure how to navigate the evening with someone who knew so much about me personally. How would I know that my therapist would turn out to be one of his school friends? The things I told my therapist about my husband, and also the ordeals that I have had about other men. The dinner went on well, and the entire time I had been avoiding my therapist's gaze. It was as if just ignoring him would solve the problem. I knew that he recognized me, and the stories Bob and him shared told me that they go way back. There was no way that all my secrets were going to be secrets, and Bob would get to know about them. I had a few more sleepless nights, after which Bob told me that there was something he wanted to discuss with me and wanted to keep my schedule free for the next day. I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom as I waited for our meeting the next day. The thought of Bob possibly knowing all my secrets made my stomach churn with anxiety. He made me sit and asked me if there was something that I wanted to share with him. I acted clueless and told him that I was not sure what he wanted me to tell him. He said that maybe what I discussed with the therapist, or why I was needing a therapist in the first place. I decided to play dumb and told him that I was just playing with him. There was no way that I had done everything that I had mentioned to him. He gave me a stern look and reminded me that honesty was important in our sessions. I knew I had to come clean and share my true feelings with him. I told him everything that I had been doing behind his back, as there was no point hiding it anymore. I knew that he already had all the details from my therapist. It was just a matter of time for him to react to my actions. I felt a sense of relief after finally coming clean, but also braced myself for the consequences that would inevitably follow. It was time to face the music and take responsibility for my actions. He heard what I had to say and left without a word. I knew that this was only going to get more and more worse going forward. Bob not reacting on the spot meant that he was planning something really wicked. I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as I watched him walk away, knowing that the situation was far from over. His silence spoke volumes, and I knew that the fallout from my confession was going to be significant. I got up the next day only to find all my stuff packed in boxes. I was confused as to what was going to happen. I guessed that Bob might be kicking me out of the house, seeing everything packed. I went downstairs and saw Bob sitting on the couch with a paper in his hand. I kind of knew that they might be divorce papers, and I was prepared to face the harsh reality. He gave me the papers and told me that this was my monthly pay that I would be getting from him, and I would have to make do with whatever he provides without any complaints. I felt a mix of relief and sadness as I realized that Bob wasn't kicking me out, but rather setting boundaries for our separation. I knew it was time to start planning for my future without him. He changed his will, and everything that I had under my name was moved to his daughter. I was left with nothing on my name. How could he do this to me after practically being married to an old man for 3 whole years? I felt betrayed and devastated by his decision to cut me out of his will so suddenly. He moved me into a small studio apartment with no maids or house help to do the chores. How could he expect me to live in poverty again while I am growing old, after being used to ordering around people to get my work done? I felt like I was being stripped of my dignity and independence, forced to confront the reality of my situation. It was a harsh wake-up call that made me question everything I thought I knew about myself and my life. I couldn't believe he was subjecting me to such conditions after all these years of living comfortably. It was a harsh reality check that forced me to confront my own sense of entitlement and privilege. He said that he was not going to divorce me, but make sure that I regret going behind his back and doing all kinds of crazy things. He wanted me to suffer longing for anyone to talk to. It was more like a solitude jail where I had no one to talk to or even see a person for days together. His intention was to isolate me emotionally and mentally, leaving me feeling completely alone and abandoned. It was a cruel form of punishment that left me feeling desperate for any kind of human connection. His plan was to make me feel the same loneliness and isolation that I had caused him to feel. It was a punishment that he believed I deserved for my actions. I now regret cheating on my husband, who had been nothing but nice to me. He made sure that I was looked after when he was away. He gave me space to do my thing without interrupting me and being patient every time I threw any tantrums at him. I should have been more faithful and nurtured my marriage, as I really had no issues as such in marriage, apart from the ones that I created. I realize now that I took his kindness for granted and made a terrible mistake. I wish I had appreciated him more and worked on our relationship instead of betraying his trust. I realize now that my actions were selfish and hurtful, and I wish I had appreciated him more. I am committed to making amends and working on rebuilding trust in our relationship. Thank you all so much for keeping me company, as this is the only interaction I have with people. It is too hard to find someone I can talk to these days due to my confinement punishment. This is the only thing that is keeping me sane. I appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to engage with me and provide some much-needed social interaction. Your support means more to me than you can imagine during this difficult time. Update. I have been asked by many of you to update everyone about my current situation. Since I have a lot of time at hand and nothing productive to do, let me just tell you guys what has happened since I moved into a small studio apartment, which was mostly the servant quarters. The transition has been challenging, but I am slowly adjusting to my new living situation. Despite the cramped space, I am grateful for the opportunity to simplify my life and focus on what truly matters. My life had turned from being a queen to literally a beggar in rags. My stepdaughter comes in often to check on me and taunt me for replacing her mother and not being loyal to her father. I knew that if it was the old me, then I could have shut her up, but right now, I do not have the power to anger her if I want to go back to my old life. I had to swallow my pride and endure her insults, knowing that my only hope of regaining my former status was to remain calm and patient. Despite her cruelty, I held on to the hope that one day I would find a way to win back the respect and power I once held. Life had become harder for me since Bob had come to know about not just but multiple men I had slept with. The insulting part, according to him, was that I had to pay men to sleep with me. He said that he was not so bad in bed that I had to go to the extent of paying me to have sex. Trust me, he had no idea how bad he was in bed. Just because no one wanted to be on his wrong side and praised him did not mean that he was actually good. Bob's ego was clearly bruised, but I couldn't bring myself to explain that it wasn't about his performance. It was about my own desires and choices, which he clearly couldn't comprehend. It was frustrating to be judged so harshly for something that was ultimately my own business. I am sure that if I was as bad in bed as he was, he would not have hesitated to get girls home and sleep with them. I would be expected to just be there and not complain about it since he was the one with power and money. I could not understand the double standards Bob and his daughter had for me just because I came from not such a wealthy family. It was frustrating to see how wealth and power seemed to dictate the treatment I received regardless of my own worth. Despite this, I refused to let their judgment affect my self-worth and confidence. As the days went by, my resentment towards Bob had been only increasing. I was left in solitary confinement for most of the days with no human in sight. It was the best punishment that I could receive. I mean, there are only so many days a person can go on without even seeing a single soul. I started losing my mind, so I started writing this to keep myself occupied. I know that I would be interested in doing this only for some time, and after that I might want to get out and get some sun, see faces other than mine. I feel like if I don't get to go out of this place, I would go insane. The isolation was suffocating, and I found myself longing for human interaction more than ever. I realized the value of connection and vowed to never take it for granted again. I long for the freedom to interact with others and experience the world beyond these walls. Bob came in after 2 long months to see how I was doing, actually to take pleasure in my misery. I begged him to take me back to the house. I would be willing to live like a maid in the house, but I wanted to see people and interact at least to some extent. This loneliness was too suffocating, and I feel like I am going to die a lonely death and no one would even know about it. This has become my biggest fear lately. He laughed at me and said that the kind of things I did, I was not going to die so easily. He said that I had shattered his image in front of his friend and made him look like a simp. It was not going to be easy for him to forgive me. I felt a pang of guilt for unintentionally hurting his pride, but I knew deep down that my mental health and need for social interaction were valid. I hoped he would eventually understand and support me in finding a balance between independence and connection with others. I told him that I would do anything that he would ask me if he gets me out of this isolation. I would also be okay if he would divorce me and let me go. He said that he was not letting me go anywhere. I was supposed to live the way he wanted me to and keep begging him for mercy. He said that I should regret my actions every second of my life. I told him that I was already doing it, and if he could be a little more lenient, I would be grateful to him for it. He responded by tightening his grip on my arm, reminding me that I was his possession and he would never let me go. I realized then that escape was not an option, and I would have to find a way to survive in this toxic situation. It has been 3 weeks since I have seen another soul. I just want to disappear now. I have no will to live. I don't see any point of my existence. I have come to accept that I am in this situation due to my actions. If I would not have listened to my friends and explored something that was formidable, maybe my life would have been different. I might not have been sexually satisfied, but at least I would have the will to live. Thank you everyone for keeping me company in these tough times. I just hope my situation changes and I get my freedom soon. Hoping for better days to come. I would be grateful to all you for keeping me sane all this time.